A genius who ended his career with a headbutt. A star who carried an entire nation to a World Cup final, only to lose it all with one single kick. The World Cup is football's grandest stage, but also its cruelest. It's the tournament where careers are immortalized and where entire reputations can collapse in just 90 minutes. At club level, there's time to make mistakes, to rebuild, to find your form again. At the World Cup, there isn't. It offers no second chances. It compresses a player's entire legacy into a single moment, and sometimes that moment haunts them for the rest of their life. And among all these downfalls, there is one that changed the way the world sees failure itself. Today, we revisit the World Cups that broke their stars. We won't follow the order of events. Buckle up, because your frustration is likely to grow with every story. David Beckham might just be the most British example of modern sporting tragedy. In 1998, he was only 23 years old, yet already the face of a new kind of English football. Stylish, media-savvy, disciplined, but also provocative enough to divide opinion. England arrived at the World Cup in France dreaming of rediscovering its glory days. But everything fell apart in the round of 16 against Argentina, a match loaded with political tension, historic rivalry, and pressure that went far beyond football itself. 7 minutes into the second half, after a rough tackle from Simeone, Beckham fell to the ground and, in a reflex, flicked his leg out in a light retaliation. It wasn't a violent act nor a loss of control, but in the heated atmosphere, the referee pulled out the red card. England were down to 10 men for nearly 50 minutes. Still, they fought bravely. They held Argentina to a 2-2 draw and dragged the match to penalties. And then, the familiar nightmare. Batty's miss, Roa's save, elimination, World Cup over, dream over. And when England lose, someone must take the blame. The next morning, every headline carried one name: Beckham, branded irresponsible, childish, even a traitor. He became the target of a collective fury that mixed sporting frustration with blind hatred. Fans hung effigies with his face, newspapers printed grotesque montages, and his name became synonymous with national disgrace. For months, every touch of the ball was met with jeers. 20 years after Beckham's fall, humiliation took on a new shape, but the essence remained the same. If once the judgment came from newspapers and pubs, now it came from the internet. And no one felt it more intensely than Neymar in 2018. The World Cup in Russia was meant to be his redemption. Brazil were rebuilding after the trauma of the 7-1 defeat, and Neymar, now at the peak of his physical and financial power, carried the symbolic weight of restoring pride to the Seleção. The nation expected from him the technical and emotional leadership that no successor to Ronaldo or Ronaldinho had truly managed to deliver. But what ended up defining his tournament wasn't his brilliance, it was the caricature. During the group stage, every fall became a global talking point. Every expression of pain was turned into a meme, a remix, or a viral parody. The hashtag number Neymar Rolling Challenge spread worldwide. The image of the magician who dazzled with creativity became the face of theatrical exaggeration. In the round of 16 against Mexico, he scored and played well, yet the focus remained on his dives. In the next round came the real blow: Brazil's elimination to Belgium, 2-1 in the quarterfinals. Brazil played well, fought hard, but were stopped by Courtois and Belgium's ruthless efficiency. And once the ball stopped rolling, the defeat became more than just technical. It became narrative. Neymar was transformed into a global punchline, a character, not a footballer. His goals, skills, and genius no longer mattered as much as his behavior. If Neymar was defeated by laughter, the next legend fell to silence, and that silence still echoes today. Roberto Baggio is one of the most respected players in Italian football history. He played 56 matches for the national team, scored 27 goals, and remains Italy's fourth highest scorer. He was the kind of player who combined elegance with calmness, someone who seemed to think the game half a second ahead of everyone else. In 1990, he was Italy's standout player as they finished third. But in 1994, in the United States, he reached both the peak and the breaking point of his career. He saved Italy against Nigeria with 2 goals, decided the match against Spain, and scored again in the semi-final against Bulgaria. The final against Brazil brought 2 contrasting footballing philosophies and 2 nations desperate for redemption. After 120 tense minutes, the score remained 0-0. It went to penalties. By the time Baggio stepped up, Italy had already missed twice. Brazil were 1 kick away from the title. He was the captain, the leader, the man who had carried them that far. The run-up was short, the technique perfect, but the ball rose just too high and flew over the bar. In that instant, Brazil were world champions, and Baggio's frozen face in the middle of the pitch became the eternal symbol of heartbreak. That miss didn't erase what he'd achieved. He was still named in the team of the tournament and received the silver ball, but the image of failure overshadowed everything else. The 1994 World Cup defeated him quietly. But if Baggio was beaten by chance, Ronaldo Fenomeno would face something that even medicine couldn't explain. Few stories reveal the symbolic power of the World Cup as clearly as Ronaldo's in 1998. He was only 21, yet already the most feared player on the planet. He had just won the FIFA World Player of the Year award, was the face of the Brazilian national team, and carried the hopes of a generation that believed it was reliving the glory of football arte. The team played with flair and confidence. Rivaldo, Dunga, Cafu, Roberto Carlos, everything seemed destined for a glorious ending in Paris. On the eve of the final, the unthinkable happened. Ronaldo suffered a convulsion in his room just hours before the match, lost consciousness, and was rushed to hospital. The news leaked before kickoff, plunging an entire nation into panic. Headlines exploded, rumors spread. Would he play or not? When the lineup was announced, disbelief swept through the world. Ronaldo was starting. No one could understand how. The final against France, which should have been the crowning moment of a golden generation, turned into one of the strangest nights in Brazilian football history. On the pitch, Ronaldo looked like a shadow of himself. No pace, no spark, almost motionless. France dominated from start to finish. Zidane scored 2 headers before halftime. Petit added a third, and the 3-0 scoreline sealed Brazil's collapse. The image of the world's best player, pale and disoriented, being carried off by his teammates became a symbol of how vulnerable even the greatest can be under the World Cup's weight. The mystery, fueled by conflicting reports involving sponsors, medical staff, and political pressure, turned the story into legend. 4 years later, Ronaldo would return to claim redemption with 2 goals in the 2002 final. But redemption never erases scars. Brazil wept with Ronaldo's body, just as Argentina would suffer in silence with Messi. Lionel Messi's relationship with the World Cup is one of football's most complex and painful sagas. No player of his generation carried as much expectation, criticism, and comparison all at once. From the very beginning, Messi was seen as the modern reincarnation of Maradona, the prodigy who not only represented Barcelona, but the rebirth of Argentina's 1986 glory. Yet his bond with the national team was never straightforward. In 2014, in Brazil, it looked as if everything would finally fall into place. Messi arrived mature, confident, leading a well-organized side that built momentum game by game. He carried Argentina through decisive moments, producing flashes of genius that brought them all the way to the final at the Maracanã. That final against Germany was tense and finely balanced, decided by inches, by a single misplaced pass, a poor clearance, a shot that flew just wide. Messi had his moment and missed. Then came Götze's extra-time goal, and the lasting image. Messi walking alone, head down, as Germany celebrated. He was named the tournament's best player, but the award felt like a cruel joke. the trophy of the nearly man. For all his brilliance, he still didn't seem to belong emotionally to the nation he represented. 4 years later in Russia, the weight was even heavier. Argentina were in chaos, tactically, emotionally, mentally. Messi, now older, looked drained. Qualification from the group came only at the last gasp. His goal celebrated more as relief than triumph. Then came the round of 16 against France. The contrast was brutal. While Mbappé sprinted into the future, Messi looked like a man trying to end a chapter with dignity. Argentina lost 4-3, and Messi left the pitch in silence. For many, it felt like the symbolic end of an era. Thankfully, he rewrote that story in 2022. Messi was undone by exhaustion, Zidane by intensity. Zidane's journey with the French national team both began and ended at World Cups. In 1998, he was the hero. 2 goals in the final against Brazil, the face of a new, diverse, and confident France. 8 years later, in 2006, he returned for one last dance. 34 years old, carrying the burden of an entire generation. France started poorly. Draws, criticism, doubts about the team's age and tempo. But slowly, they rediscovered their rhythm, and Zidane began to dictate play again with the calm of a man who saw the game a second ahead of everyone else. Against Brazil in the quarterfinals, he delivered one of the finest performances of his career. In the semi-final against Portugal, he scored the winning penalty and walked off to applause even from his opponents. It looked like the perfect farewell. The final against Italy began beautifully. Just 7 minutes in, Zidane scored with a panenka, a gesture of pure confidence and ice-cold precision. But Italy struck back quickly through Materazzi, and the tension started to build. The two exchanged words throughout the match and into extra time, until, in the 110th minute, the breaking point arrived. Zidane turned and drove his head straight into Materazzi's chest. The referee produced the red card. The entire stadium froze. It was the final match of one of football's greatest ever players. He walked off slowly, head down, eyes forward, while the world tried to comprehend what had just happened. Minutes later, France lost on penalties. That image, Zidane walking into the tunnel, shoulders heavy, silence all around, became one of the most powerful moments in football history. The 2006 World Cup defeated him precisely where he had always been strongest: emotional control. Zidane's headbutt shocked the world, but nothing compared to Maradona's collapse in 1994. In 1994, Diego Maradona returned to the World Cup as if defying fate itself. He was 33, his body battered by injuries and excess, yet the same fiery competitiveness still burned within him. After years of chaos and a painful exit in 1990, Argentina saw him as their last bridge to a glorious past. In the opening matches, he looked reborn. He led by example, guided the younger players, and commanded respect simply by being there. Against Greece, he scored a stunning goal into the top corner, then ran towards the camera screaming with wide, furious eyes. A celebration that would become one of the most iconic moments of his entire career. It wasn't just a goal, it was a roar of survival. But the euphoria didn't last. Days later came the news that froze the football world. Maradona had failed a doping test. His sample tested positive for ephedrine, a banned stimulant. FIFA immediately expelled him from the tournament, and the Argentine dream collapsed overnight. Without their captain, the team fell apart, losing rhythm, losing belief, and ultimately losing to Romania in the round of 16. Maradona's farewell was broadcast live, walking hand in hand with a nurse, expression blank, as if he already knew this was the end. If excesses destroyed Maradona, the next man on our list would face the only opponent no one can defeat: time. Cristiano Ronaldo built his career on discipline. He came closer than anyone to turning perfection into a habit, mastering his body, refining his technique, and maintaining an almost superhuman competitiveness. For nearly 2 decades, the word decline didn't seem to apply to him. But the 2022 World Cup in Qatar proved that even discipline can't outrun time. Portugal arrived strong, balanced, deep, and more collective than ever before. And for the first time, Cristiano was no longer the absolute center of attention. At 37, he remained one of the game's most iconic figures. But his body had started to show its limits, and sitting on the bench was no longer avoidable. Then came the breaking point. The quarter-final against Morocco. He started on the bench. The game was tense. And Morocco's goal changed everything. As the camera lingered on him, composed but restless, eyes fixed on the pitch, the story began to write itself. When he finally came on, it was too late. Portugal were eliminated, 1-0. And what remained wasn't the match itself, but the image. Cristiano walking alone down the tunnel, tears in his eyes, fully aware that this was likely his last World Cup. There was no scandal, no meltdown, just the collective understanding that a legendary chapter had closed. Could he still change that story in the next World Cup? Maybe, but it seems unlikely. Still, in football, nothing is impossible. The World Cup is both altar and graveyard. It elevates men to the status of gods and just as swiftly drags them back down to earth. There's no stage more glorious and none more unforgiving. In football, glory is always temporary, a promise that fades the moment the whistle blows. So tell me, which of these downfalls stayed with you? Which moment still hurts to remember? Leave it in the comments. Let's see which World Cup heartbreak you'll never forget.